He didn't love me when I was okay, only when I was falling apart. I didn't see it at first. Actually, I think a part of me did. I just didn't want to admit it. Because when someone shows up for you, when you're at your lowest, it feels like love. It feels like they care. Like they see you in a way no one else does. And that's what he did. Every time I was overwhelmed, every time I felt like I couldn't handle things on my own, he was there, checking in, calling, saying all the right things. And I held on to that because it made me feel safe. It made me feel chosen. But what I didn't notice back then was what happened when I wasn't struggling, when I was okay, when I wasn't sad or confused or needing him to hold everything together. That's when he changed. Not in a loud way. Not in a way you could easily point at and say, that's the problem. Just small shifts, slower replies, shorter conversations, less effort. And I noticed it. Of course I did. Like the day I told him, I was finally starting to feel okay again. And he just said, that's good, then disappeared for the rest of the day. No follow-up, no check-in, nothing. And I remember sitting there thinking, wait, isn't this a good thing? That was the moment something didn't feel right. But I still ignored it. Because how could someone who shows up for you like that not actually care? That didn't make sense to me. So instead of questioning it, I adjusted. I told myself, he's just busy. He'll come around. I'm overthinking again. But the truth is, it wasn't random. It was a pattern. The worse I felt, the closer he got, the better I became, the further he went. And the confusing part, I didn't know if I was healing or losing him. I thought he was helping me get better, but I didn't realize he needed me that way. Because the more I became someone who didn't need saving, the more he stopped showing up. At first, I tried not to think about it too much. I told myself I was just noticing things that weren't really there, because the alternative didn't make sense. Why would someone be more present when you're struggling and less present when you're okay? That's not how love is supposed to work. So I ignored it, or at least, I tried to, but the pattern didn't stop. If anything, it became clearer. Every time I had a bad day, he showed up instantly. What's wrong? Talk to me. I'm here. And I'd fall right back into it. Because in those moments, it felt real. It felt like he cared. But then, the moment I started feeling better, he disappeared again. Not completely, just enough to make me question myself, like I was expecting too much, or reading too deeply into things. And the confusing part, he never did anything obviously wrong. He didn't argue. He didn't say anything hurtful. He just pulled back, quietly. And that kind of distance, it's harder to explain, because you can't point at it. You can't prove it. You just feel it. And I felt it more and more, until I started noticing something else. Something I couldn't ignore anymore. I was starting to hold things in. Not because I wanted to, but because I knew what would happen if I didn't. If I seemed too okay, too stable, too put together, he'd fade again. So without even realizing it, I started shrinking parts of myself. I stayed quiet about the progress I was making. I downplayed how okay I actually felt, just to keep him close. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just something he was doing. I was starting to change too. Not into someone better, but into someone smaller. And the scariest part, I didn't even know if he realized it, or if this was exactly what he wanted. Because the more I needed him, the more he stayed. It didn't hit me all at once. It was slow, quiet, the kind of realization that builds over time, until you can't ignore it anymore. I started paying attention, not to what he said, but to when he showed up. And when he didn't, that's when everything started to make sense. Not in a way that felt good, but in a way that felt undeniable. I noticed how his energy changed, depending on mine. When I was overwhelmed, he was consistent, present, almost attentive. But when I was calm, when I didn't need reassurance, when I wasn't leaning on him to feel okay, he pulled back, every time. And it wasn't coincidence. It was predictable. Almost like he knew exactly when I needed him. And when I didn't, that's when the question hit me. Not does he care, but what does he actually care about? And I didn't like the answer, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized it wasn't me. Not really. It was the version of me that needed him, the version that depended on him, the version that made him feel important. Because every time I stood on my own, every time I handled things without him, it was like I became less interesting, less worth showing up for. And that realization, it was uncomfortable, because it forced me to see something else, something I had been avoiding. I wasn't just reacting to his behavior anymore. I was starting to understand it. And once you understand something like that, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending. You can't convince yourself it's just a phase, or bad timing, or stress. It becomes clear, too clear. And the hardest part, realizing that everything I thought was love might have just been control. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Every interaction started to feel different. Not because he changed, but because I did. I stopped looking at what he said and started noticing what he didn't do. The moments he pulled back, the times he went quiet, right when I was okay. And suddenly, it all felt intentional, not obvious, not something you could easily explain to someone else, but clear enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I tested it, not in a dramatic way. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. I just stopped needing him. I stopped reaching out first. I stopped sharing every little thing I was going through. I let myself be okay, without involving him in it. And at first, nothing happened. Then slowly, the distance grew. The messages became shorter, less frequent, less interested, until one day, it felt like I was talking to a stranger. And that was the confirmation I didn't want, but needed, because it showed me something I had been avoiding the entire time. He wasn't losing me. He was losing control. And without that, there was nothing left for him to hold on to. No reason to stay as close. No reason to keep showing up the same way. And as painful as that realization was, it gave me something I didn't have before. Clarity. Not the kind that makes you emotional, but the kind that makes you quiet, still, certain. Because in that moment, I finally understood I wasn't losing him. I was finally seeing him. I thought it would hurt more. Walking away, letting it go, letting him go. But it didn't, not in the way I expected. Because by the time I got there, I had already done the hardest part. I had already seen the truth. And once you see something clearly, you don't need closure the same way anymore. You don't need explanations. You don't need to hear them admit it. You just understand. So I didn't confront him. I didn't ask why. I didn't try to make him explain something I already felt in my gut. I just stopped. Stopped reaching. Stopped waiting. Stopped holding on to something that was never really holding on to me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. Not happy. Not relieved. Just calm. Like something inside me had finally settled. Because I wasn't trying to figure him out anymore. I wasn't trying to make it make sense. I wasn't trying to be who he needed me to be, just to keep him close. I just let it end. And the surprising part, he didn't fight for it. He didn't chase. He didn't try to fix anything. He just let it fade. And instead of breaking me, that confirmed everything. Because real love doesn't disappear. When you stop needing it, it doesn't fade. When you finally stand on your own, it stays. It shows up. It chooses you, not your broken pieces. And in that moment, I realized something I wish I had understood earlier. I didn't lose someone who loved me. I let go of someone who only loved the version of me that made him feel needed. And that's not love. That's something else. Something I'm no longer willing to carry.